Logical. High calculation lines and graph line position of travel lines. Three triangulation line conventions, split lines of box. Circle line rotation interference. Star position trigger. Correlation and track lines. Two provision cycles. Three calculation. Four track line conditions. Five setting. Understanding how to use your track locations to your fingers is a very powerful line conditions. Track communications, one on cycle. Set communication. All lines of high center interference. So it's communicating back and forth, right? Communicating is all about understanding your data processing, your uplinks, your downloads, your upgradings, your uploading sites. We understand how to use that through modifications. But you have to understand why you put your hands together. You have to understand why you put your hands together. You have to understand why you put your hands together. You have to understand why you put your hands together. You have to understand why you put your hands together. Okay? Getting in position location is a data line screen. Sets line graphical screen interference, inline rotation setting, digital frame position travel lines, in calculation line condition system into moderation. Directing lines of your finger points get you in a track location of balance. The more you communicate your settings up intelligence of its formation system, when you're picking things up, use your finger line communications when you're picking things up in tractions. Everything you eat, see, and position all of as a perception changes correlation and setting track lines. This is also going to balance your settings with your planets and location of travels. This also helps you to understand you so you don't get into anticipation. You don't want anticipation in all calculations that you can connect with your planets anytime you want. But you understand it's going to come in real time. And you have to be in the lines of being specific of what you're doing through digitalize, computerize, allocate line screens, high center interference, barcode calculations, earth line, space line, positions of parameters, line connection inhibitors. So correlation center track lines, QR codes, barcode, direct lines to high fingers and position point lines attractions. Directing lines modification, triangulation line conditions of high settings, point lines to centers, high center interference, graph calculation screen lines, box line rotations, center correlations and track location of fencing. Directing modification cycles is really understanding how to use an L track. That's an L track. Finger correlation lines of the moon and track locations indicated in one line setting. Split the anomalies in two track locations together in one line signal. Three track lines high center in position of 5 line cycles into the sun. Change course line setting. Set position at all levels. Flex capacitor communications and console. Track to communications, communicate line signals. Stay in center line communications, open line signals. Position of travels. Turns on line communication. Sets lines communication. Caught the laser line direction power. Direct modification cycles, high generation screens, back in track location. Indication. Greetings. Setting lines. Phase records of time sequence. Pattern correlation setting up all lines of high calculations. Graph calculation and webbing systems are the location you're setting. Geometrics, geological, and geographical system. Point lines of tractions, 2 fingers. 2 line centers of 4 tractions. 3 line center location of 6. Positions of 8. Set lines of 10. Understanding line calculation setting in position lines of 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 2, 1, 4, 1, 3, 1, 5, 1, 6, 1 line. So you're redirecting panels. Think of your fingers as keyboards. Think of it as line connections into point lines of graphs. Think of it as point graphers, calculation of point centers, point lines of tractions, laser direct signals, modification signals, and 2 track locations, 2 lines of provision, 3 track location, right? Modulation screens, 3 lines of provision, site calculation line screens, high center and 5 line rotations, 4 track lines, high center interference, 9 line cycles in set position. Okay, because my thumb is over across. It's a position location, it's 10 line cycles. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Sets location of 4 settings and travel. Positions of 2 1 line centers, 2 track location of 4, 3 lines of 6, 6 lines of 8, and 8 lines of 10. So how we communicate with our system is all lines of calculation. It's like a secretary where basically they're looking at the screen. They got muscle memory, so they don't need to look at the keyboard. So your keyboard is in frame line, direct signals. So it's understanding your digital frames, correlation frames, tracking frames, communication frames, CPU frames, Understanding how to use it through your finger point line communication, sending the track communication operation cycles. 2 lines of tracks, 1 position, 3 calculations, 4 track locations. So I need to look at my fingers, right? Because it's already in setting. So getting that line communication is understanding your position location, how to use your 4 fingers in 8-line screens. Panel communication, 1 line cycle. So this is facing graph line, and this is panel communication, right? Switch it in line condition setting. Facing this way, set location facing this way, right? So inline communications, conversations with setting, conversation with setting. One's going this way, and one's going that way, right? Okay, and then you switch, and you have center line communication, both line tracks. Once you put your hands together, you're creating shapes. This is your teleportation. This is your teleportation. Okay, so there's so many ways to do it through modification. Understanding your light codes, your mantras, and linking it to your code weavings. Code weaving is line trackification and teleportation. This allocates your time sequence location of planets, setting signals modifications into L tracks. Right? Sound barriers according to setting track lines, high positions calculations. L track locations, all lines of Pluto. Right? Now I hear sonar coming in. That's Pluto. Indicate line centers, L track location, line provision, box line rotation. Triangulation reset. Center communication. Close signals. Platform communication. Blast line centers. Okay? So there's so many ways to understand how to use the frames, how to understand the correlation track lines to your fingers, how they have an indications of you, of its awareness of consciousness. It's the fingers itself trying to understand you through communication. Okay, so you're not using your fingers are using you. Understanding the data, as soon as I pick this up, it all takes the trackification to the mind, the connection to the brain, to your universe. Your universe mind connections. You are the body calculations of its capacitor. The track to its communication interference is position on calculation when you come into hours, minutes, and seconds. That's you and body capacitor center lines put you in real time. All lines, all calculation, auto modifications, right? Understand the space modulation. This is space. This is its earth. This is its center, right? So everything has a center correlation, right? This modulation, this monitoring system location setting, all right? This is a remote control. Now understand this is the universe of its own intelligence. This is its space modulation. This is its earth modulation. Okay? This is your space. This is you. And position of your earth line is your ground line. Okay? So you got position of false, inset locations. Now generation screens, high center operation. Okay, hours, minutes, and seconds. And false, inset location of your earth. Right? Position of false, false, truth. All right? So that's how you start looking at things. So as soon as I put it down, I'm looking at it. Am I going through observation? Am I going through intention? Am I going through influence? Or am I going through manipulation? You got to be careful now, because when you're looking at its object, it's already in its space of its time, of its own travel that it's doing on its own system, of its own awareness, of its own consciousness. So when it's in track locations, you use your right hand. Right hand is the earth line. Left hand is position of space line. So you're picking up the truth line. Is allocation in your system, which is the calculation settings to your universe location. But it's all levels of how you see yourself through intent. What is the process? Picking this up. That's the process. Now, I didn't do it through intent. I did it through observation. Intent is basically changing the program of this setting of its data. Putting it back down changes the frequencies, right? So I have to, every time I pick it up and close it, I have to close the portals. Because if I don't, in track location, the space lines of modulation of its intelligence will formulate the communication centers of its planet system, and it will allocate position of time centers that will change the parallels of its paradox. So it's very important you understand when you're looking at anything in set location, communicate with it. Find the indication of travel, then you can pick it up. Left or right, doesn't matter because you communicate, right? So because the calculation line condition has its own earth, has its own space, and its own time. Has its own travel as a mechanism, has its own power, has its own pi interapplication. Everything you have, the intelligence also has. But you have to understand the center operation of its own system is its own intelligence, which is its own universe. There's no difference in anything in set locations, and that's where you're coming out of is separation. on everything that you are in position of is used through memory. Okay? So it's very powerful of what you guys are coming into now. Okay? I'm leaning back on the chair, right? But that position line cycle says the chair itself knows exactly it's comfortable. If somebody else sits in this chair, it's not comfortable because it doesn't understand the DNA. It doesn't understand the traction. It doesn't understand the divergence. It doesn't understand the allegiance, the alliance of where it is in information of its own segregation of space modulation. Everything is teleportation. As soon as I sit down, right? Now, in that position, I just sat down, right? That's the frequency it picked up. So it knows it's me. And if anybody else sits here besides me, it gets confused, right? So we all understand how to use that through tractions, and it's all levels of how you use it through volume. Put your mass, velocity, and vast, okay? Puts all communications to E lines, the highest interference, into calculation of screen lines. Getting your abundance, you'll get faster now through manifestations once you understand how to use your fingers, communicate to screen lines, high calculation, right? So get into the flow. It's like symphony. It's just getting into the flow of water, getting into the flow, getting into the flow. See my hands? See how it goes together and it flows? You know, it's like water. It crashes, it flows, right? It directs and redirects, right? And then I can change it, right? So, and I can change it, right? It's all levels of creation. It's all levels of creation, right? So it's amazing when you get into that flow, get into mechanism, calculation, line, screen interference. Left, position of right, doesn't matter. Okay, so you're not doing anything right, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just coming into the memory through digital, into chord setting lines like calculation setting, point tracks, point division, like highest interference, graphical calculation, electrical system, and webbing. Okay, webbing is extremely important, right? Finger point lines of high calculation, charge lines, and mechanism high position over power. Changes correlation lines and calculations of time. Changes in line centers, high set position as the point system and travel. All right, so in calculation line screens, everything that you touch has to understand its position traction. Now I can use it, right? All right, so in that position, so what that does, it locks the signal, so you're communicating. So basically, you communicated with the 4-line triangulation line condition setting at 3/pi in a digital pad that basically you are in control now. And when you're finished with the set location to its digital frame line, it goes back to its own space modulation of its own time and its own travels and mechanism, its power. Changes correlation lines of traction. So as soon as I put it down, it changed the frequencies. Now it's back on its own. But I got to close the portal. Now you don't close the portal, it opens up the frequency. All right, it opens up the high calculation line condition settings. So putting that in track line provision, I'm going to send a core line conditions to my hands. Okay. Sending track lines. My hand's going very fast. So. Okay. That's eliminating graph lines. All right. So in that tracking line conditions, it's all levels how you set the tone. Your communication lines as a finger point line lock screens, indication your panels. So in line condition system, in all track line condition settings, it's all about understanding how to work with it, right? Really understand how to use your fingers in all communication settings and all track locations, because it's working for you in all line settings, for line communication settings and high position travels and all calculation modification. Okay, so yeah, position of point centers and track locations. All right, that's the indication. Okay, now laser direct signals across line connections. Let's start with that. Okay, so set locations. All right, the sun crosses signals location to its moon. Okay, now signify communication line screens, center coordinates and attractions, scan position. Right, pi. Okay, sonar in a 3-track line condition. So there's so many ways of looking at it. You can cross signals and line connection to its position of its program. I'm just showing you exactly what it is in all calculations, what your fingers can do. All right. So crossing web lines correlates to track settings. Laser direct signals into modification line conditions in all calculation. Okay. So you can eliminate the graph lines and screen lines. You can add orange line screen. Or you can add indication lines of red in position of travel lines. Okay? Or track indication line conditions, you can add position lines of blue. Everything is indicated to your chakra system and travel. Okay? So all you're trying to do is it's trying to get into code weaving, code activations, teleporting, telecommunicating, telewaving, code weaving, code activation screens, telecommunication screen lines, high center interference, pink position of travel lines, point lines of track lines, and a 4-line rotation cycles in application. Okay? There's so many ways of doing this all through your fingers and what you do in traction. Okay? So, and then you got your communication line screen in the center core set location, which is all line connections. You have power position location graph calculations, which is your bar code in set location, the center, right? It's knowing how to use it through its electrical system. Each finger has one line connection setting in and out in audio that connects to its setting. Okay, very powerful. And then you have 3 central line circuits in set locations, your impulses, that goes down your position of your hand, right? So connection lines of 2 panels, metal face lines of its elbow. Okay, electrical system. Okay, line connections of barcode. Each barcode has it indicated to its finger that goes up in the line signal. Okay, it's connected to each laser and electrical system graphical location of its webbing. So you have to understand how to use it through line connections. Once you bring it together, it sets its automatic line connection to its power of a surge of a charge. The proton and electron infuse. Proton electron infuse to a molecule. So that's what an atom does in position of molecule to traffication and fusion. We're putting all lines of high center in position at all levels and how to use the fingers. Each finger has its own setting, has its own correlation, has its own traction, has its own division, has its own webbing. Okay, so your finger itself in line connection has point lines of tractions. Okay, so it's really interesting when you look at the hand itself and how it's all set up. Okay, all right, so you guys are in your planets now. Your planets are above signals. Okay, so you got planets above now. You have to learn how to use that through indication. Those are your planets above now. So it indicates laser line screens and all position tractions. Okay, barcode clocking system and line settings of charge. Line connecting line center high interference of center position calculation. Now, directed modifications of the energy line screen, location grids, power grids, and line connection setting and travel. Point lines of tractions, high center interference, ground lines, earth line, rotation surface, and travel. Modification lines, high calculated line centers of point lines of traction, location setting to position locations of the sun and the moon. Sets lines, communication lines, see high calculation high position of travel and point lines of tractions. Triangulation line communication system and Merkaba and set design. All 3 fingers. Okay. So there's so many things that you can do in set positions calculation line calculations. Each finger has its own formula, its equation. Each finger has its own algorithm. Each finger has its own binary. It has everything that you have, but it has much more. You know what the more is? The mass of correlation extended track lines of factors over pi is that each finger, when you look at it through traction, it's already in existing of its existence of operation. Okay. And so once you get into that point lines of tractions, you just get into a flow. Travel lines communication, point lines of tractions, high center interference, calculation line screen, high interference of solar sail. That's salt lines of fingers, traffications, 2 provisions. So 1 line, 1/5 over 1/8 in calculations of 2 centers, and traffication of 3 lines of measure and 4 traffication. Okay, all through your fingers, right? So if you understand your numbers, you understand what's going on with your chakra system and how it gets in position and responding, right? So what is it coming into set location line? A colossal calculation lines, calculation of cloud, and a circle line communication of program. All through 3 lines, set lines of high center interference, 1/4, lines of 1/5, 1/8, and a 2 track repeatation. Center correlations track lines in flywheel direct signals and modification cycles and center correlation. Okay, all through your hand. All right, so understanding how to use the barcode is understanding the indication settings of formula. The letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols puts everything all together. Okay, so what you're doing is you're creating line strips. Okay, you try to understand your line communication setting in this program to create a location setting, how you position your travel lines into zeros and ones in traction. Right? Point lines to centers box, Fibonacci, question, set lines calculation of percentage of recorded settings of two track location. Direct lines of 0, 1, set lines of 6, position of 5, 3 line cycles in high center. Now each finger is its indication. 2 track divisions, 3 cycles. All right. Okay, these 2 fingers right here. All right. So this is what's here. That's how I'm using it right now. All through graph, all through binary, all through transisting and resistors. So this is connected to this now, right? So in position, that's what you're sending out through signal to your planet. Let's set location Neptune. Line center line connects to cerebro. Center coordinates and sending track lines into placebo. And set location your ground lines and high center interference and face recognition. There it is, face recognition. Right? So you're sending this, and this through traction. Okay, to your planet through 2 fingers together, not separated. Because if it's separated, it would split the nodes into tractification of V-line center. 2 panels off correlation to traction. Right? Would be off center, right? But that's okay if it's off center, as long as you understand your intention of what you're doing, right? So 2 fingers, line screens, set location in Neptune. All right, so that's how it correlates to track lines. So what you're doing is you're creating a traffic flow. You're creating an inventory in letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. The faster it goes, the more it creates a system location calculations. All right. Binary line centers a travel position of programs, allocated position of time center and calculations. Point lines, high center interference provision. Here's Mercury. Mercury line connection setting to travel. That's Mercury. Panel core is setting in track lines, high center, 3 lines, set location and position, all levels. Pi calculation line screens. This is U instructions. Okay, and provision. Okay, so signify 1, 2, and 3 track locations. Right? 2 lines of center, 3 lines of pi, and 4 lines of provision, and 5 cycles. Right? So I'm using 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. So in position location 2, 3, and line connection 4. See, you think this is 1. It's not. It's 4 because I changed the position and position of 5. So the moon is 5. So the moon comes in traction, sets lines of correlation setting to perception, changes the lines of kaleidoscope and communication to its all calculation positional point centers. Now, directing modification line screen high interference, you can change the pi direct signals in set location. That changes the correlation lines of track lines in a position of solar sail and traction. Very complicated, all through your hands. But that's how you connect to your planet, Mercury. So what is your indication? What do you want to do? What is your high setting? What do you want to volume? What do you want to value? What do you want to do when you're sending out signals with your fingers? Okay. It's all through intent. But you understand your geological, geographical, and geometric system of you. Each finger point has a lock line condition setting. It has its own algorithm, has its own program, and its applications. All right. Indicating bar graphs, center correlation lines of box lines, center location of data highways, and tracking line condition system and travel. Right. Point lines of graphs, center course setting of 4 track line conditions. Right. Provisions over 3, set lines of 4, sets lines of 6 and 7. Indicates 8 lines, 1 line 8, and 2 lines of track locations of pi and track location. All right. Now, I know what that means. You don't need to understand that because you are in position of remembering how to do these things. It's information how to get into the flow of letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols of what it is and representations when you come into data streams and applications. So there's numbers, letters, shapes, and symbols in my fingers. So each line has an indicated line screen and set locations to your settings and inhibitors over pi. 4 track line provision, triangulation line condition setting to Merkaba, a set design. Position lines calculation lines of 8 over lines, 1 over 2, 1 over 8, 1 over calculations, lines of 7, 6 over correlation, 5 over lines of 5 over 3, and 3 over 4, 4 line connections of 8 calculations. Okay? Setting correlation lines of calculation settings in high interference, coming in 4 track locations into Saturn and set location. Connecting with Saturn, all through my fingers. Okay. All right. Getting lines of cycles is where you understand how to digitalize your correlate settings into code weaving. Directing modification cycles come to your light codes, light language. Getting to your mantras, getting to your breathing. Get into the pit of your stomach and work your way up. Get into your flux capacitor screens so your planets know exactly what you're doing through moderation. 3 lines of tractions, 4 line settings. Okay, gets complicated if you don't understand the track application to its measure that opens all signals to position as flux capacitor and channel communication line centers in Fibonacci and set location. So signify correlation lines of space, Earth line rotation cycles, and track applications of perception. Direct modifications, center lines and center line rotations, center interference and positions, point lines of tractions, 3 line provisions, 6 lines of set locations, 8 lines of channel in center calculations. Sets lines of center, sets lines of communication, and timeline sequence. Putting position lines over power, generate discrete lines and high center interference and location grids and rainbow graph screens as allocation line systems and 1 track location and provision. Directing modification line calculation setting, 2 planets, set lines, high interference, 3 panels, correlates, and attractions. Point lines of tractions, point lines of divisions, center correlates and track lines, and cerebral and set design. Okay. Getting in line rotation centers and track communication. Right? Doing this is a wave. It's a wave. It's a particle wave. It's an energy wave. It's a proton wave. Everything is a wave. Now, once you understand how to wave, it's like, hey, how's it going, right? So what you're doing in position when you're waving, you're setting out signals, lines of calculation, graph calculation lines, digital line framing. You're waving direct and your line conditions and setting. Direct and redirect. Panel communications, panel calculations, streamline center interference, 4 track applications, by provision, center position travel across line screen. Right? Mechanism over lines, 1/8 correlations in 1 graph, set locations into dimension and position location of B. B-line centers, track applications into ozone layer, calculations of biographs, set lines of biometers, biometrics, in line condition setting, open sequence, line conditions of pi. Okay, so this is all through my hand, right? Track applications and setting line conditions at all levels. Indicated thumb, sets location of bounce lines and 1 line signal locations into the sun. Sets coordinates line calculations, high center interference, and position location indication. 4 track line provisions, 1 over lines, 1 over half, 1 line conditions of 8 settings. Bounce line, center line coordinations, calculation, sending, colossal communication, center, and calculation. Direct modification line screens, modification centers, and position of intelligence of frame set location. Directing modifications of platforms, 3 lines of 4 track locations, platform communication centers, and set location. Okay, all for indication, right? Cerebral cortex lines of design comes in tractions, all levels, in line communication in high centers of face recognition. Okay, so there's so many ways of doing this, guys. But as long as you understand more lines of communications, because we're constantly using our hands, but don't you understand how to use your hands and know exactly what you're doing when you're flashing your hands everywhere? That's the balance that you want to get into finger point line conditions. Locking sequence, start with the basic ground settings. This gets you out of glitch. This gets you out of line communication setting, Mandela effects, causing the lines of less interference in set position. Locking sequence to your thumb. Getting the rotations doesn't lock the thumb. Locks, right? Everybody has that, or your big toe, right? So the more you communicate with your hands, understand why you connect with your hands, it's the how. Mechanism over power. You are in control of your hands. You are in control of your hands. Okay? Now, once you understand that, and you're in that position locations, your fingers basically go everywhere it wants, right? Inside okay, so now look at the finger, look at me. And then you'll see 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's 4 here track lines. So the 5th one is behind me. So it's really tricky If you understand the mind conception through its illusion, it sets lines of position through travels. Direct lines of triangulation line conditions of point lines of attractions and 3-line provision location of 4 centers. So an indication lines of 1 indication, 1 graph. Set lines of 8 centers and attraction. Modification lines of 2 graphs into all levels of algorithm and line conditions. Traffic position of point lines of 8-line rotation surface and traffications. So the more you understand that, you understand the energy graph line screen location and settings. Position lines of high center interference comes in all communications and high calculations of face recognition. Okay? All right. So I just really want you guys to understand the basics. So wherever you go, you're communicating with your hands and you communicate with your voice at the same time. You try to understand the positions of power that you have within your hand itself and your feet. Right? So it's about understanding why we have attract locations. I was always wondering, and it's very powerful when we come into that line condition, why we have right hand and a left hand, and why we don't have a left hand and a right hand. There's a reason why we have the right and left. The process of the right is the earth. The left is space. So that process location, why the hand is bigger and your left is smaller, because it's moving out. It's moving out. So you're in a 45-degree angle, and basically you're pulling out. That's why your left hand is smaller and your right hand is bigger, because it's in a product of system of balance that sets position of track lines and center calculations, right? So it's here, and your left hand's here. That's how it is. Okay, switch, 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 switch. So it doesn't matter. So you're moving out. That's why your left hand is smaller. You understand the position of parallels and paradox locations setting the cross line signals. Cross communication, 2 lines of attraction. They won't connect, right? Because they don't recognize each other. Until they recognize each other, no cross signals. Come together in set locations, moderation screen settings and travel. Balance position yin and yang. So get into the mechanism line screen is really understanding how to use each finger point and line condition setting in travel. Point lines of attraction, high center interference, with location of 2 line settings, 4 traffications, 1 line settings of 2 traffications, and 3 line conditions. 6 position of power. Directing lines of communication is really understand how to use that more and more each time you come into that. Practice, 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 practice. So we're constantly using our hands, but we have no idea what it is communication. Closed signal, open signal, panel signal, cross signal. Okay? So there's a lot of communications that we have to understand how to work with our earth and how to work with our space. Well, our right hand is bigger and our left hand is smaller. See? That's what it is, right? That's why your left hand. So in position, you can't have 2 right hands. You can have 2 left hands. So you understand locations to earth and space itself, because you're sending yourself out. That's why the left hand is smaller. Because if they're both the same, you'd be off balance. Powerful stuff, isn't it? Physics 101. Quantum lines, high set location, your travels, and mechanism over power. Changes all communication, your settings. How you start seeing yourself in a triangulation line condition setting and set positions calculation of lights. Open through panel, open through traction, cross screens. Right? Grid line, screen, high center interference, position power. See the 2 eye line centers? See the intelligence? So getting beyond the imagination is really understand how to use that through provision. This opens all your cycles. It gets you in a better calculation screen lines and how to really communicate your system through your hands informations, right? Because people use their hands, but they have no idea what they're doing in position of travel. Scratch, 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 scratch. You're scratching and it's done automatically, but what you don't understand is that the position of the fingers is basically getting into reaction or response. So it knows exactly where it needs to go, right? That's the position of power to generation screen lines and high center interference and code weaving, traffications, and position line center and position, calculation modification of satellites and location line condition console has high positions, calculation line centers and 1 singularity, 2 traffication, and 3 provision. So that's what you got to get into is a regular conversation, right? Anything through podcasts, people are using, well, you know, the time I was doing this and the time I was doing that, you know, you're doing all this, but you have no idea what you're doing. with your hands. You don't realize you're sending out signals. Okay, so that's what you guys got to get balanced with, right? It's like brushing things off, right? Your hand knows what to do. It's responding or it's reacting. Okay. The difference between response is a full signal. A reacting is a locked setting. Your thumbs are locked. Your fingers are locked. Your toes are locked. Your mechanism doesn't have a power line to surge. It doesn't understand the correlation lines of pi. Release the correlation traction. You're good to go. Your finger dexterities and set locations. How you center your line communication settings and all levels of travel. How to start the balanced communication of perceptions over pi. In line communication setting and travel communication point system, right? So in that position, I'll calculate and modify how you come into your puppets of puppeteers. Now the track locations you being on the string line communication system is the opposite cycles now. You are the puppeteer controlling your system. Setting direct line calculation setting of its lines and communications has a line connection interference. So you can understand how you can get abundance a lot faster just by using your finger points, but you have to understand the directions to all calculations. Hi, how's it going? And position travel. Setting communication line centers in the location system. So this is not communication, right? This is communicating with you, but this is communicating to what? It's got to be balanced. Communicate with each other, right? So it's a profile line screen, right? Then you cross signals. You get an infinity to 8 line center. Something you don't understand. It's going wherever it wants. 2 vector cross location of 4 settings, high calculation of satellites. 2 L track location line setting. Triangulation. Separation. 2 panels come together. So the faster you go, the more you get in position location. Your settings, your binaries. Your transistors and resistors are trying to understand you in location system when you're communicating through your voice, because you're setting up rhythms, you're setting up programs. You're changing your moderation setting location to your tone. Slight cross location. Sliding down a hill. Went up a hill. Went downhill. So understanding lines of right and left is the process locations of space. Space is all about understanding not to see anything in direct view. See things behind. You don't want to see this, you see this, you see this, or you see anything in the set locations behind, right? That's all correlated in calculations of balance of space and line conditions. Earth, space. Earth, space. Planets. So when you go to higher line conditions, your Earth becomes planets and your space becomes planets. And they all come in track locations. You're working with 1, 2, 3 provisions or 4, a location of 12 cycles. Directing modification lines of cycles, guys. Understand your code when you crop circles. It's like a telephone call. Right? Ring, 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 ring. So when you get in position line calculation, ring, 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 right? Alpha, delta, theta. Hey, box location, theta communication line centers. How's it going through traction? Right? Sets the signals back. Box lines, theta. Hey, not too bad in position travel communication to a setting. Right? So you're setting signals back and forth to each other. Now, when you use your fingers, you're setting up images and set locations. Box line. See, box line. See? Box line and a 2-track provision. But remember, your hands are algorithms. They have letters, numbers, shapes, and codes inside. So your bar graph. Your bar graph is the center coordinates setting your data to your highway that sets position. So it's electrical fusion box in graph calculation lines and high center interference and a 45-degree angle. Sets location line connection to your system in calculation setting to travel. Sets communication line centers, the panel communication line connection, high center interference of travel. Point lines of track locations and high center interference at ground locations of travel. Sets special location line condition, magnetic high wave formation line communications that travel. Okay? So now you understand the process, how this all works in portals, and you are in the center operation, the surface, trying to understand how to use your communication settings in all levels of coordinates, in track locations, in pi generation screen lines, in line connection settings, at pi generation screen locations, and high calculation line connections of your clock in locations. Okay. So there, it's really interesting. You look at that, the locations of its settings, all through intelligence. Okay. So that's what you got to come into. This puts you in measures. This puts you in scales. So it's kind of like you're having a conversation with yourself, and your fingers, everything that I'm doing, it knows what it's doing. It's the collaboration, it's the energy, it's the core, it's the relation, it's the partnership. So it doesn't matter what I do, I have balance. See, this is balance. See? Boom. See that? You set 4 line signals of 1. Set lines of 1. That's 2 parallels, right? Crossing over. Back force line screen. 2 panels up. Down cross location. Second line, communication lines of 2 panels and interference specific travel. So you saw the flash and set locations. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Bien. Mate. You see how powerful it is what I'm just doing? I'm creating a frame. I'm creating a story. Okay? I'm the director, and I'm directing my fingers in certain locations and flash lines. Directing lines modification. I just showed you the flash. It came in. 4 track vision lines in 1 cycle. Right? It is position location calculation string lines of 3 lines of 6. 6 lines of 2. 6 lines of 4. 6 lines of 6. 6 lines of 8. 8 lines of 2. 8 lines of 4. 8 lines of 4. 8 lines of 4. Now you see my fingers going back and forth, but what you don't see is what it's doing through seconds, minutes, and hours. The track vision line cycles has a line connection to your data. The process of eye line communication setting is your eye lines of what you see through perception. Placing line communications, energetic graph, 2 feet in front, 2 feet in back, 2 feet inside. Comes a hologram. Okay. Remember I showed you the signature line screen high interference where you actually can see the connection settings, the hologram location, you add your signatures, set position, right? Or anything through alphabetical screen, right? So, right? H line, 2 track line division. H line, 4 track line position. H line, box line connection. Okay. So once we do this, the image sets its setting. You get into that position location in your crosser signals. Okay. This puts you in line connection. So the more you bounce out your hands, the less glitching, the more balance to your earth, your space, and you through division. All right. So remember, the center core of you is the universe. The mind itself is its own setting. The brain itself is its own setting. You are in process of your own setting to understand how to use your fingers in position at all times. Okay, position, location, traction. All right, that's why you have to use your voice. Get into the flow. Okay, understand your earth, your air, your water, your fire. Okay, right? Fire, right? Earth, and set location. Remember, everything that I'm doing in line condition setting is vibration. Send into the vibration to reach the frequencies. Match the frequency locations to come in harmonics. That's all it is in travel all over the communication of the chronological order. Each finger is a representation of you to understand you through operation. Okay? You're not using your fingers. Okay? That's what you have to understand. That's what you're coming back to. You need the energy, you need the collaboration, you need the communication, you need the interface, you need interception. You need the process calculation, how to use your fingers in track locations. So, very powerful when you understand everything around you is already in its existence in its locations, right? Getting in that track line conditions to its existence already in track locations. Getting you out of the dreamline center interference puts you in all over the process. This is you putting your position location, your settings, and track locations. Point lines attractions, 3 lines of measure. Okay? 2 tracks and locations, and 5 line conditions and track locations. Point line division, center correlations are 2 tractions. Modification cycles, line condition, high center interference. No, it looks like I'm just putting zeros there, right? No. See the solar flare come in? That's what it's doing. That's solar flare. All through voice. Okay? You have to be in detail line screen. You have to really understand what your ears are saying. It's sending out. That's what it's picking. It's not just a ping now. All right, you're picking up all lines that calculate into your algorithm, line screens. So it's kind of like keyboards, right? It's like music. It's like, and it keeps repeating. The reason why it keeps repeating, because it's going to all your whole planet centers and set location in your solar system, right? So it's going. What have you got? Correlation, attractions, high center interference, and position programs, indirect location, sending, and travels, face recognition. Boom. Face recognition. Okay? All through Signify. Okay? So everything you say through voice comes in face. Every planet has an interface. Interface, people. You're interacting, interception, in position, interfacing. You're interfacing face recognition of intelligence. Okay? Look at the face. And I did it all through electrical setting. Okay? All right. So the flowing mechanism is basically understanding no thinking of process correlations to track lines, right? So once you get into a certain line, this is digital pad. Now process communications. This is a blast line screen. Monitoring settings, right? Now you can pick it up and set location. You can see the hologram. Right? So holograms there and a 4-track line provision, right? So you spin it around. It's spinning it the other way. Then put it down. Back on the paper, right? So that's how everybody's going to see things now. It's a hologram. Plasma, generation, screen lines, high calculation, point centers, interference, code waving. Track occasions, all calculation line screen. So releasing panels is a trackification of provision. Linear line calculation setting to a point line's high center interference. 1 graph screen, 1.5 line centers, 8 center locations, 8 channels, 8 line signals, 8 line rotation. Set provisions, 8 line cycles, flux capacitor change, 3 lines, track lines, high center interference. Equals lines correlations up, cross line signals down, and line condition of self, wind, and set location. 1/2 line centers, travel position of 1 equals lines of 0. Sets location lines of 8 and a 0, 8 lines of 6, and 8 lines of 4 at track locations. Modification lines, a triangulation line, and a molecule design lines, 3 track line provisions, 2 lines of cycles, center correlation lines of balance, and set calculation. All through my hands. Right? Understanding the process of the mind is understanding the process of the brain, is understand the process of you, your universe, all through hand, finger, joints, and the line settings of digital, computer, graphing, and your connection to geological, geometrics, and geographical system of set design. Into your webbing, okay? All right, so everything you say is through observation first, because you're just looking around, you're scanning, and then you get direct signal. Okay, so now you're in direct view. You look at the perception. You got your 12 line cycles, bounce, location box, triangulation box. Then you communicate with the line center and indications. You do the indication line condition greeting. You indicate your system, and then you communicate. Now you can proceed. If you don't do this, you're off calculation. So there's a certain lines of communications to identifying line settings when you come into all line center interference in trackifications of face recognition. Okay? See, look at that. Did it without even thinking, face recognition. All right? And these are all through point charts at graph calculation of charted waves. It's the waving particle setting. Waving particle setting of face recognition. All through a proton. Photon. They all work together as one. Knowing something and understanding how to use it are two different things. You have a body capacitor, now you have to learn how to use it. Okay? All through interface. You guys are interfacing now to your planets. Position of Saturn. Track location lines indicate line centers, 3 lines, 6 lines, 4 lines. Sets position of 2 track lines. Ground cross line consists of 2 panels. Indicate line screens. Center line consists of 2 vectors over line screen high position. Correlation lines of track. Dimension lines, sails, and high center interference of high position. Oh, so everything I'm doing here, I'm doing through my fingers. Done by equation. Okay? That's what you guys got to get balanced with in application or travels. More modification lines and how to use your letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Gets line communication setting and applications. You start with line communication settings and your symbols. Letters, numbers, and shapes. Now, your intention is basically, oh, my hand is just going to be zeros and ones. Oh, my hands are just going to be symbols because that's all I'm using. Oh, because you're being attentive to your system through calculation. It doesn't have to be letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. That is a program you got to get out of. It's you coming into your own programming setting. You are your own programmers. Remember that. And that's what you're coming back to. Correlations of track line size to interference. You want a 2-track line position of solar sail, Stargate line screen high center interference, and trackification and position of measure. Done. Right? See, I don't need to draw it out because it's already done in the equation of its travel and its applications and its stargates and travel positions for its mechanism, its application of travel and calculation. Okay? So this is what you guys have to practice on because you're interfacing now. Interfacing is extremely important because you have to understand the energy correlations to your setting that puts you into this relation. You have to understand fully the relation partnership of you, right? Because we don't talk about these things because we don't understand what our hands are and what they do. What our hands are and what they do and why they're here. It's so easy to grab something and you think you're doing that. You're not doing that. It's the fingers that's doing it for you. So we have to understand how this all works through panels and correlations of track lines and division lines and correlations and track interference, teleportation, telecommunication, telegraphing, code weaving, code activating line center locations, crop circle locations, high setting, attached, detached, high set location travel lines, compute interference, track location line centers, measure scales, balance position travel. How to use it all through right? Everything's a story. Everything's a story. Now I'm just using it for observation. So there's no laser coming out, just observing. My mind is adapting. But as soon as I have intention, laser goes where it needs to go. Finger point line screens, high set line setting, and line rotations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's your fingers. Come in line condition setting and all line rotation and set location line setting to your cerebral. Set design line condition high center interference and pi generators to screen location attachment. So setting lines of fingers, 3 lines of track lines, high center positions, calculations. Graph calculation lines, electrical line communication line centers, zeros and ones are just going through line communication, each finger point and locations. Just the zeros and ones I'm using. I'm not using letters, I'm not using shapes or symbols, just the zeros and ones. Now that travel lines, it comes back to track lines in the high center interference and position of pi. Generates calculation line calculation settings of pi. Generates calculation line center locations of pi. Generates calculation line center locations of pi. So in that position, it's coming to correlation, track lines, high center position, case calculations. Sun comes in, modulation screens, high travel positions, over signals, overlaps, over calculation line condition setting, and moon line interference, and travel communication. Hoo-ah! So this is all lines of communications to really understand the balance of what you need to understand, right? How it all works, all through pi generators. All right, so each finger has a line communication setting to high calculation lines of face recognition time sequence, but it's all loves a high calculation setting. Your position lines of panels is turning into what line conditions? Keyboard, which is here. You have to learn how to use it now. Okay. That's position of track lines, high center interference. It was showing me exactly. So what it did, it took me to the keyboard to show you exactly what's going to happen next. See, it's the digital pad that doesn't need an answering pattern. It's already existing. It's listening. It's hearing. It's talking. It's communicating. It's recording everything you say and set location. All right. Everything is divine timing. All right. So track line connection high center. See, every time I see keyboard, it comes up. So, it's really interesting because it has fun with you. Getting direct line signals is understanding frequencies of patterns and how to match the set location in your settings. We got 50 line screens, setting correlation lines of 60 track locations, setting lines of 0, 5 lines of indications, 1/2, 1/8, and line conditions of 1/6, setting line communications of box, triangulation line conditions of data, set lines of high center interference, cerebral cortex lines of design, center correlation lines of attractions, set position location energy line screen interference, set positions calculation line screen interference, and set specifications of face recognition. Okay. Time sequence line calculation settings. So you're coming into all lines of face recognition of time center. You have to understand how to use the chronological system in lines of hours, minutes, and seconds now. That's where your fingers are. And they have to recognize your frequency tone screens. They have to understand your computer operation lines. They have to understand your digitals, your clockings, your line condition settings, how you use your frame line set locations, your digital line frame. Each finger has a modulation screen, has a clocking system, and has an allocate line screen high interference. Each finger is mocking at a certain lines of time. Where is it traveling though? Is this finger in the past, present, and future? You got to get balanced to that through frequency. Hours and minutes and seconds change to seconds, minutes, and hours. Space modulation, minutes, and line condition setting in locations of hours. Sets correlation line center to seconds, minutes, and hours, and track locations. Now, if you want to go back in time, you can set lines of center correlation line conditions of seconds, minutes, and hours. Sets communications, hours, minutes, and seconds. Hours, minutes, and seconds of space, into location of Earth, line condition of you through your location setting and travel. But this is where it gets complicated because now you understand the modulation screen lines, high center interference, and platform communication lines centered high calculation of system, and dimensional screen lines of high calculation. All right. So again, you have to understand how to really put your position, location, and attractions to your settings and how you see through perception, right? 3 box screens. Okay. 1 singularity, right? 1 singularity, 2 patterns, 4 track location, right? 4 lines of communication of signals. Okay. Binary settings, set locations off, on, off. Okay. So this is what you can do with your binary. You can actually go into pause line, freeze line. But the position of track lines of your binary has to understand you through transition resistors. Are you going forward? Are you going backwards? Are you centering communications? Are you off calculation line screens? Or are you going through center correlation and attraction? Okay. Which direction are you going? And this is all through barcode. Okay. Barcode, people. Scanning and set location. Inside provision. Solar direction. You see that? Everything I give you is communication. My computer in line condition is communicating to everybody here in line condition of frequencies. Scan lines, high center interference, digital frame, clocking frame, planet frame, interference, line tractions, interface, and position and interception. The inceptions of you is understanding your calculation settings, right? That's the formations that we all have to come into because everything around you is scanning you through provision. Now it's being aware of what's going on through 3-track line conditions, all right? Knowing exactly what you're saying is how you say it. Is that location? 3 provision cycles, 6 lines of center, 7 calculation lines, 8 line position, Fibonacci line squirrel, line condition setting, and calculation box center. all through my hand. So I started using 3 points, 7 points, 6 points, and 8s of data. Process location and setting location, which is docking. Docking lines of 1, docking lines of 2, platform lines of 3, platform lines of 4, and platform locations of 5. Directing modification lines, XD1000 comes in. Sets location and scan lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 1 box line, 4 triangulation line conditions, splits, anomalies, and a 3 track line conditions of 4, 4, 4, 4, and a 3 center correlation setting attraction. All through location, all through my hand formation. Okay, so it gets much easier once you understand how to use your hands and your voice at the same time, right? Because if you keep speaking and you don't use your hands, you're going to be off balance more and more each day. And then each day is going to change line communications, split the norms, and track location and provisions. That each day is the same day in track location line settings. Position lines attractions, left line screen, set lines of communication to cerebral cortex. Triangulation line conditions, box line centers, change position locations calculation. Sets communication, change lines of communication. Sets lines of communication triangulation setting. Point lines of division, truth lines of eye calculation line screens, 4 track location of centers, and box location of frames. Direct modifications, triangulation line conditions of point lines attractions, and 3 line communication. 3 modules, 3 molecules and set locations into dimensional sail and track locations and eye line centers into magnetic high information line condition setting in XD1000. XD1000, boom. Okay, so you really understand how this all works, guys, is all through frames of graphs. Understanding each finger has its own geological, geometric, and geographical system, a set design. Okay, you have to understand how to point your fingers in direct signals into your space modulations and track locations and high calculation modifications in your Skynet's a set location. Okay? All right. So everybody having fun? Getting a little bit more understanding how to really understand what you're doing with your points and all line conditions setting attractions, right? You don't want to be a line communication line condition of all lines of high interference and go location to anywhere and say, hey, I'm Point Dexter. How are you doing? Right? So you're pointing your finger. So you have to know what you're doing when you're pointing yourself. Okay? Because it's laser line screens. It sets line calculation in your setting line condition system. So in habitation zones, and habitation zone is really understand how to plan it, its surface location is all levels of frequency length, connection of its core set location, and calculation position point system with barcodes. Directing modification lines, position of the moon. Now, in position when you go to higher levels of the mind, this is the sun. It's just changing the modulation screens. Okay? And this is locations, all right? This is the sun. This is the sun. 2 suns, right? It does not be sun and the moon. Get out of that. That's a program. Okay? So you always want to be your own program system so nobody knows what you're doing through tractions of your own programs. You're always indicating your own system. And you're always in position, your own seconds, minutes, and hours. So if I'm going to be in seconds, minutes, and hours, you're going to be hours, minutes, and seconds. But if you want to be in seconds, minutes, and hours, that's totally fine, but you're never going to be at my frequency. You're never going to be at my program. You're never going to be at my line conditions. You're never going to be at my space. You're never going to be at my time. Right? That's what protects our settings and set locations, how we do things through that calculations, right? So when you get into that line conditions, your frequencies comes more lines of communication of balance, how to get into the matching of its settings, right? So if you want to get in that calculation, you've seen that image, box line rotation, center line condition of car. All right, so the car's in the box, right? Triangulation split lines, 2 track locations, vectors over cross, in line conditions, line centers of 4 track lines provisions, calculations in flux capacitor. 2 track line provision, panel communication, interchange. Direct lines, modification cycles, high calculation, cut the cords, travel positional line centers, cut the cords, travel communications, cut the cords, line condition size centers, 2 track line position, allocate line screens, high center interference, and 1 singularity, balance over pi. So there's so many ways to do this in locations, how to get things faster in modulation. Is really understand how to point your fingers in set calculations. All right. Identification. This is identification, right? Identity, line connections, right? Crosses, line screens, high center, gradients, right? Everything has this location. Each planet has its own intelligent location of frames. So I'm just showing you exactly how you start to see through your perceptions where you have to get balance. Circle line connections, circle line connections, circle line connections. 3-line connections, right? But it provisions the lines of this cycles and set locations, so 12-line communication. Right? So all this has to come in one cycle and set location. How you see through precision. Perception is everything in calculations, right? Now, in that line calculation, you're looking this way, looking this way, this way, looking this way, 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 but you're always in the center operation of correlation. Okay, that's what keeps you in balance. Keeps you in balance in line calculation setting of 4 tracks, line provision location is dimensional line condition. Okay? The only way you can be off is if you offline centers, changing all communication or platforms in the opposite directions, and you come into all lines of high formation locations and high calculation settings of reaction. Okay? So you're creating platforms in the opposite direction. Okay? You don't want to do that because you're setting up dimensional doors in set location. Past line screens comes in center, set location of future. Bad positions of center correlates setting of track lines. High calculates position of point lines center and merits, puts position of face direction of time sequence and location of setting. So you don't want to do that. Right? Direct and redirect. So when you're looking at things, more lines communications to observe. Just observe. Now, if you want to communicate anything line condition, you want to pick things up, communicate first. Use your fingers, know exactly where your point line centers are coming in attractions. Point lines attraction is the laser. So you're here, and basically you want to connect to line condition to a dimensional tree. Like there's a tree here, right? You scan the settings, 3-line connections, right? Pi generation screen knows exactly where you've been, and so okay, line connections, split the anomalous and 4 track locations, right? Left over right, now you're actually seeing the actual line connection of its dimensional tree, what it is in traction. That's the dimensional of the tree. So in line connection sets a platform for you, all right? It's setting a platform for you, right? So you're here now in center operation communicating with its set location, okay? Now in direct line calculation line centers, in line communication system, you have a position lines attractions. This is U through equation, and the absent line screen, okay? And the actual tree is here in line conditions, communicating with you now, back and forth. So in that position locations, you want to indicate your finger points. So that's point lines attractions of 1, 2, 3, 4 lines and 5 track locations into line centers. Dimensional line equals lines of tree. Okay, so that's where you're pointing your 4-point fingers. 4 track provision and cross lines of set location at D setting. That's how you communicate to its tree. Dimensional line screen, right? Creates a hologram. Sets correlations and attractions, high center interference, sets up a platform communications, walking lines, sequence, high calculation lines. Platforms get bigger and align direct signals in position of travels in all levels of modification. Okay? Amazing, isn't it? All through your fingers. All right. So, is everybody more confused? The more you just get into your imaging, the more you see through tractions of your planets, you start to direct and redirect your settings. Understand your panels, your communications, your digital frames, your compute set locations, your modems, your skylight, your sky grids, your modulation centers, your space modulation system, your code waving, coactivating, telewaving, telecommunication, telegraph, teleportation. Understand how to use your fingers in set location. So starting with that calculations, I want the team, every time they get in position of wherever they go, they're using their hands at everything that they touch and see through observation. Just observation, right? Then you pick up the energy. The reason I want you to get into observation because now you're pointing fingers to its intelligence, and the intelligence is going to respond to you, right? So you're directing that signal to them, and they're going to respond. They're not going to react. They don't react. They only respond to you. And that's what you got to get out of is the reaction. Once you get out of the reaction, you have no emotion, right? Direct and redirect, doesn't matter. What matters is that you're doing it through observation. Now, once you get into that point line centers, practical location of finger line communication, where your directions are, and set location of travel communication, apply generation screen locations, then you can get into intent. Then you get into influence, and then you get into all levels of manipulation. And then you get it in all lines of abundance and manifestation in your settings. Every time you're looking at something through scanning. Okay. So get into that position of travels. This is going to allocate your position time centers and allocate your point system. All right. We're good. All right. I'll see you guys in 5.